everyone, and welcome to the Swamp Creatures podcast. Today, we are honored to be joined by a guy who I interviewed back in 2020, back when I was a terrible interviewer, as I was just telling him before we started here. And now it's just fun to kind of have someone from back in that era back on and to kind of catch up. So, none other than Buck Johnson.
Is this where I say hello?
Yeah, I guess so.
Thank you guys for having me on here. And I know that feeling of going back and listening or watching the you of old. It's tough to do.
Very tough to do. Yeah, I agree.
I had someone recently that's a newer listener say, "I'm going to start with your episode 1 and make my way all through them." And I was like, no, please don't do that. Just make your way. Start now and make your way back until it gets old or boring, and then we'll be good.
Well, that's always where it gets funny. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone back and re-listened to Joe Rogan's first episode, but same thing. It's like painful to listen to.
Really? I haven't thought of it. That's pretty funny. I have not.
I actually really like going to watch those old ones sometimes. It just shows you how they started. You know, from he was just in the living room with Brian Redband, and they were just looking things up and commenting on like the news or what was going on, maybe memes or different things like that. And then juxtapose that to what it is today. It's like, okay, everyone's got to start somewhere, so it kind of gives you a little bit of inspiration. If you go look back at old Swamp Creatures, though, it's like 6 of us just getting drunk and talking about libertarianism.
Fair.
So to that, us now, and we've had some pretty good interviews in the past few weeks.
Oh yeah, no, it's been a really fun ride. So if, I guess we'll just kind of jump right into this a little bit then. Buck, you kind of just want to explain to our audience who you are, what you're about. I'm sure many of them know who you are already, but we might as well run through the typical shtick in that regard.
Okay, I can give a quick lowdown. I'm Buck Johnson, host of the Counterflow podcast. It used to be called Death to Tyrants back when I was on your show before. And I'm a firefighter. I'm a lieutenant in a fire department, which I can't disclose as to not get in trouble with political opinions like mine. But let's see, I live in Lockhart, Texas. I'm an Orthodox Christian. The podcast started as a hardcore ANCAP, anarcho-capitalist podcast, and it's kind of had some twists and turns along the way. And now I definitely include a lot of Orthodox Christianity topics and then kind of some spiritual warfare, culture stuff, still do politics, and that's kind of the gist of it.
Right on. So before we jump into some of the Orthodox stuff, because I really wanted to bring you on and talk about that, I just kind of want to see, like, where have you been as far as politics since 2020? Because as you pointed out, back when we interviewed you then, well, Rob, you weren't in that interview, but this was back when I was doing the show with Eric, before even Swamp Creatures. And, you've definitely been through quite a journey since then. So you want to kind of explain a little bit of that?
Yeah, let's see. I suppose, I hope this doesn't give me a bad name, but there was a group of us that people called post-libertarians. And I think that was in 2020 or 2021. I can't remember exactly. And so we kind of pulled away from the libertarian movement. And because some of us, there's various reasons. We all had different reasons. It wasn't like one coordinated effort to make some movement by any means. And I got out of it because I just became, I was a libertarian in 2000. And when I went back to the libertarian meetings, and I guess it was 2016 and then 2020 for sure, because I was trying to get Hornberger nominated. I looked around at the LP Travis County in Austin, and I was like, holy goodness, these are the same people that were here back in 2000, and no one did anything since then. And they all had these, like, y'all, I'm sure you and your audience know this, these boring, meetings of who's going to run for commissioner and who's going to do land office and all of these things. And it's just like, oh, I will. And it's like, what was the point of all this? Seems weird. It doesn't seem like anyone was running to actually do stuff. So I kind of got turned off by that. And then 2020 kind of shook my world, as it did most people's. And so I started to become disenchanted with politics strictly, and I started seeing things in kind of a non-material way, like a spiritual way. And so that kind of, it's not like I'm anti-libertarian by any means. If you went down the line and said, "What about this issue? This issue?" There are a lot of them where I would still match up with libertarianism, but I don't call myself that. I don't call myself anything other than an Orthodox Christian, because for one reason, when you do that, you get pigeonholed, and so I found myself, not in necessarily debates, but conversations with someone that would disagree with me, and I would say, well, I'm a libertarian, and then it's like, boom, oh, well, then that means you think this, and they would try to like pigeonhole me, like they knew everything I already thought. So I quit using that label. Thaddeus Russell is the one that first told me, he said, you're putting a ceiling on yourself when you use that label, and people are going to put you in a corner. And so I kind of quit using political labels, broadly speaking. So I guess that's where I'm at. I would say to make things simple, I certainly would be lean to the right politically if someone were to go down, the list of topics. I'm pro-gun and all of that kind of stuff, and anti-tax and anti-war and things like that. So I haven't changed a ton politically. It's just that politics aren't what I lead with anymore, and it's not like my worldview anymore.
No, definitely picked up on that listening to some of your shows in the more recent, since you've rebranded to Counterflow and everything. It definitely is a very different. Well, that actually, this came up in your interview with Dave recently, and I thought I would ask you this then too. Kind of looking back at, we interviewed you back then, and now you're on what is a completely different show now.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think you now would judge you from like that time of the Hornberger campaign?
Oof. I would say I had a lot to learn. I was an atheist too, so that's probably, I should have thrown that in there. That's the biggest change in me. So I probably would hear myself, and I think I would cringe, to be quite honest. And I would say, sweet little Buck had so many starry-eyed opinions on how the world works, and he was wrong.
What would you say made you make that switch from being an atheist to where you are now, Orthodox Christian? Sorry, my voice is a little nasally. I'm a little sick.
No worries.
Yeah.
Things I saw over 2020 and 2021, I started noticing that it wasn't just politicians making boneheaded decisions. I started thinking and seeing like actual evil. And so to almost cope with that, you'd have to think, well, if there's actual evil going on here, there must be good. And so I started going down the rabbit hole and searching for good. And I started looking at it out of the material realm and looking at the spiritual realm. And I had some guests on my show over those years, and they kept throwing Orthodox, the word orthodoxy or Orthodox Christianity. It wasn't even the topic, but they'd mention it, and then we'd move on. And it was people that I respected, the way they think and the way they kind of, their worldview and how they saw what was happening over those years. And so I just started researching Orthodox Christianity. I started thinking, that's interesting. What is the difference between that and the kind of boomer Christianity that I knew as a kid, or Protestantism? And so I started a deep dive, and it led me to where I'm at now.
Gotcha.
That's really interesting too. So I'll if I'm being real, I honestly don't know much about the Orthodox faith other than a little, at least that branch of Christianity, other than the little bit I was exposed to when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I really wanted to talk with you on this, on the show, because I've kind of seen you online transitioning from, I didn't know you were an atheist before, but I could definitely, I can tell when someone's found God.
Mm-hmm.
And I can definitely say that in 2020, I think I felt that same feeling of like, with all the darkness in the world, you kind of feel this urge to want to seek out the good, to seek out the remnant.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are you gonna get saved live on the show, on the pod? Are we about
I mean, eventually.
baptism?
I don't know. If that's the case, then him and our last guest will be competing for the baptism.
Okay.
The last guest was the Catholic anarchist Cal Malinette. So that
I
was a fun.
Okay, I don't know that person.
Yeah, he's just a meme, kind of a memeing guy, friend of mine. We did Anarchy Ball back in the day, but
Oh, yeah.
much
Yes. Okay.
much like you guys at the post. I was about to say post right, but post libertarian. We all kind of went in our separate directions eventually too. But yeah, no. As far as orthodoxy goes, like what exactly were like the specific things that drew you to that? Like I know I understand that you say that it came up a lot, but what was it while you were researching it that really kind of sucked you in? Like, oh wow, like there is some deep truths to be found here.
I would say the initial attraction, and it still is a big attraction to it. I always like to find the origin of whatever I'm getting into, and so I can kind of equate it a few different ways. One is when I was what you would say a libertarian, I suppose. I liked Murray Rothbard because that was like the pure version of libertarianism, and Hans Hermann Hoppe and these guys, rather than say John Stossel or something that was a little bit kind of sugar coated or watered down. And so when I same with music too. When I love really old music. When I got into jazz, I started looking at what's the original jazz. When I got into blues, I started looking, well, who are the first blues artists, et cetera, so on and so on. Punk rock, same thing. And so as I was diving into Christianity, I thought, well, let's find out the original version of it and where this all started. And that's the Orthodox Church. And lo and behold, I didn't know that. So once I discovered it was like, wait a second. And the Orthodox worldview and teachings of the faith were not much different, but different enough to the Christianity I grew up on. And I almost felt cheated in a way where it was like, wait a second, why didn't someone explain it like this? Why didn't I know this, et cetera, et cetera? And so as I discovered deeper and into the history, I was just, it blew my mind and I loved it. I was just shocked. Like so many people don't know this stuff. And for instance, when I found out like Peter from the Bible that knew Jesus, right? Simon Peter, Saint Peter, he was the bishop of the first Orthodox Church. And it was like, this isn't like the TV pastors or something where they just create this big church out of nothing and get a bunch of people. And they're like, this church had Peter from the Bible there. And that, it's the Antiochian Orthodox Church. And those kind of things blew my mind.
Interesting, because you never really hear which that's another thing I've been coming across in my research more recently too, is those kind of the things that you don't really, what happened after, I guess you could say.
Yes, and it hasn't stopped since Peter was that first bishop of that basically the first church. It's what we call apostolic succession, and the chain has been unbroken since then. The teachings are the same. For instance, so if someone from, let's say, I don't know, 80 AD walked and got into a time machine and came into my church today, other than maybe some language differences, they would understand what was going on. It would make sense to them and they would grasp like, okay, I understand all of this. Whereas if they went to, let's say, Billy Joe Bob's pastor, church down the road, they would think it was like heretical. They wouldn't know what was going on, with the rock band and the TED Talks and whatnot. So, yeah, it's unchanged since 33 AD, basically.
Pat's asking some questions here in the chat. So when you say Orthodox, does that refer to Catholic Orthodox?
So, kind of, yes. We say in our creed is I believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and we were the same church. The Catholics were too, basically Orthodox, until what's called the Great Schism of 1054. And in that year, the churches split. Well, they didn't split. The Catholics left the original teachings of the church and went their own route. And several hundred years later, Protestantism started and broke off from the Catholic Church. And then you have all these divisions in Protestantism. and even some in Catholicism. And then, of course, if you think of every Protestant denomination, there's tons. But all while they took these routes off over here and started splitting up, the Orthodox Church kept the same exact route and same message and same teachings and same liturgies, basically.
So I guess you could say they embrace tradition.
Extremely, yeah. That's, and they are kind of the last bastion against a lot of the craziness that we see today. Like my church never closed during 2020, 2021. None of that. We have a common, it's called common cup or whatever, communion, where everyone goes up to it and get the priest gets the blood and flesh, the bread and wine out of there, feeds it to you. None of that ever changed. There was no masking in my church, nothing like that. They would not, they refused to close, of course. And
Did you
so
face any backlash over that? Like, did the city ever come try and stop you?
I wasn't at the church during the time, but as far as I understand, no, they did not.
Texas.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It's the benefits of being in one of the states that's relatively freer, so to speak.
Yes.
Do you view you being a part of this church and your religion as a way to kind of spread not libertarianism, I guess, but your political views in a way, and say, hey, well, this is what Hans Hermann Hoppe says. This is what Murray Rothbard says to people who don't normally get to hear that, and who are just mostly, I guess, conservative right, Republican right, religious.
Mm-hmm. You mean like in my church, would we have these conversations?
Yeah.
Not in it specifically, but afterwards when we're all having what they call coffee hour, or the snacks and food. Sometimes politics comes up. I will say most of my close friends at the church are very, very well read on politics, and so they know all of these things. So I don't have even. I could try to teach them some, but they already know who Murray Rothbard is and who Hans Hermann Hoppe is. I would say a lot of the quote unquote like based Orthodox clergy and people like that are very, very well read, and they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. And a lot of them have been libertarian at some point, or there's some sort of libertarian adjacent, I would say.
That's interesting because I'm sure you've seen a lot of those images floating around online of what we would call like woke clergy.
Yeah, we don't have
The
that.
joke I've made is the Reformation and its consequences, but I feel like I don't really see that as much at least with the Orthodox types.
No, you won't see that. That's the Orthodox Church has stood very strong against all of that kind of stuff, and as far as I can tell, will always. The priests and people within the church that I know, they don't back down to things like that.
Well, that's good to hear. So just kind of a little bit of overlap with the politics and religion as well. There's a lot going on in Ukraine right now, and I'm seeing a lot
Mm-hmm.
of conflicting things in regards to the Orthodox churches over there, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought I'd get kind of your take on that.
Okay, I will explain this as best as I can, and I won't get too into the weeds here. And I should say for anyone watching this, I am not speaking for the Orthodox Church. This is my view on how and the way I will articulate how I understand it to be. So there is it's called the Patriarch, Ecumenical Patriarch, let's say. It's a group over certain churches, and they are pushing the true church that's been in Ukraine for thousands of years out, and they've created this new church there in Ukraine. And as you could imagine, this one's backed by the U.S. State Department, Joe Biden, all of these kind of people, Zelensky, obviously, and that church is being propped up, and they're pretending it's some sort of real Orthodox church, but it's really being funded by all of this, the people that none of us probably like very much. So in while they're doing that, they're actually trying to quite literally push out the old church that was already there, the original Ukrainian Orthodox Church, including a lot of the monks. They have killed some of these people as well.
And then Russia, a lot of Russians are Eastern Orthodox as well,
Yeah,
correct? So,
Russia is an Eastern My parish is a branch, so it's called ROKOR, and it means Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. So
mhm.
but the actual parish I go to is a Russian Orthodox church, although I would say 95% of the liturgy is in English. There's a little bit of Slavic thrown in there, and there's some Russians at my church, of course. But other than that, yeah, we are based. The people that are basically my priest's boss, if you will, way up the line, are in Russia.
You have ties to Vladimir Putin. Is that what I'm hearing?
If the FBI is listening,
No, yeah. Is that church? So the Russian Eastern Orthodox Church, is that similar to the old church that we're talking about in Ukraine? That's kind of being pushed out.
correct.
Correct. Okay. Good. I'm just not familiar with the situation. So I'm just like, the backstory about the church. You don't really hear that much in the news. So to hear what's going on with that's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, that's the the news won't tell you exactly what's going on, but they will pretend that this new fake church is real.
And
It,
they're also calling it Orthodox and funding it.
oh, correct. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, they're calling it
The
Orthodox.
I could try and find this image, but the thing that made me want to bring this up was there was a painting in one of these Ukrainian, what they're dubbing the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. There was a painting that had these two historical figures from the right sector, which is like, that far right militant group in Ukraine.
Yeah.
There was this painting that had the black and red flag of the right sector, the Ukrainian flag, and I'm not sure if it was an angel or a saint that they had above them, but it was basically one of those sort of wartime things of like God is on our side. That's what it almost felt like.
Okay. I haven't seen that image specifically.
Let me see if I could find it and bring that up. But no, I found it, kind of. There's always kind of that thing during war where it seems like the states try to push the religious institutions, to come to their aid.
Yes. Well, they're straight up funding this one. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be like if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's U.S. federal government created some new version of a Baptist church. We would all know how ridiculous it is, but a lot
Mhm.
of people around the world possibly wouldn't.
And the Azov Battalion, they have anything to do with any of this yet with the new church?
I mean, I'm sure they have something to do with Zelensky's. They're his fighting force. So
Right.
I specifically, they're all part of the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I could be misremembering, but in researching this, I read somewhere, I think I remember seeing something about the Azov Battalion basically committing hate crimes against the Russian Orthodox
That's
Church before they were pushed out.
I have seen that too.
Yeah, it's whatever your views stand on, that's just tragic all
Yeah,
around.
yeah.
Can't seem to find this. I hate it when this happens. I should have fucking saved this one. But yeah, if you see that floating around, that was something that it kind of made me lift an eyebrow, like, what the hell is going on here,
There's a lot.
Another one, though, that I found while researching was apparently there is another branch of the Orthodox Church that kind of isn't a part of the same tradition that you're a part of in North Africa.
I don't know. Is it? Do you know what it's called?
Yeah, that one I can pull up.
All right.
But it was another one that there was the difference is there was still a difference that made them consider themselves to be different from the Eastern Orthodox Church in Europe, but it was still one that it still seemed to be in that same tradition to a degree.
Was it because they were black? No, I'm just messing with you. Sorry.
Play that card, right?
It's one thing Buck's not telling us about this church.
We'll get there.
Oh man, sorry. A little humor while he's looking
Nope.
that up.
Yeah.
I do want to ask Buck about the current events going on. So once we get that looked up, I want to see what your thoughts are on this Trump indictment. Some of this alien news going on, the disclosures. I want to get your opinion on that. We always like to talk aliens here.
It's the swamp. We got to talk about cryptids and all that fun stuff.
Oh yeah.
So apparently, this would be the Syriac Orthodox. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Okay, I don't know much about them. There are a ton of jurisdictions within Orthodoxy. It's not centralized per se, like Catholicism is. There's not like one person that leads. Well, there is. It's Christ, but we don't have a regular person on earth that
Have
leads.
you heard of them?
And so there's a ton of jurisdictions. There's Serbian Orthodox, there's Russian Orthodox, there's Ukrainian Orthodox, there's Greek Orthodox, of course, the Orthodox Church of America. There's a ton. So I don't know all of them. And some of them aren't in communion with others too. So there's some splits, but I don't know as much of that stuff.
Okay, so that's interesting. That's at least gives me some context of why it seems very decentralized.
Yes,
But
it is.
yeah, no. If we want to dive into politics, though, let's get into some of the real fun stuff here.
I was
Yes.
trying to book. I have a book somewhere over here that really goes into the Orthodox view on UFOs and stuff. But
Oh yeah, we can talk about that. If you have that's a crazy
Oh my!
UFO deception, the UFO deception.
Father Spirit and Bailey, this one's very good. And there's Father Seraphim Rose has one too, a chapter on UFOs in one of his books, but I can't. I don't know where it's at right now.
The basics. What does it talk about? What's the connection there that author's making in that book?
That they are demons, and that if you read certain church fathers back in the day, they were basically describing what would have been called UFOs nowadays, and that they knew they were demonic entities. Now, this is not talking about like the government. If they're, it's very possible the CIA or someone's doing some of these goofy things. I'm not talking about that, but just let's say a red flash through the sky that goes technically faster than anything should be able to go or whatnot. That has been around forever. So
Well, even if you look back at old paintings and there's evidence of, I guess you would say, UFOs
yeah,
and I don't know if you're a fan of Ancient Aliens. Have you seen like carvings and just ancient technologies and how ancient civilizations were made? There's a lot of things that were lost along the way.
yes, yeah.
But who knows what is actually going on? What we do know is this David Gurush has come out and said that he's being a conduit for a few whistleblowers and has alleged that the U.S. has at least 12 UAPs or UFOs in possession, and he kind of claimed that sometimes there's pilots with these crashed or landed UFOs, and so being on the libertarian side of things, we're kind of like, do you agree with what he's saying? Do you take him for his word, or just because he's a government agent? Are we now not believing in aliens anymore? Or did you believe in aliens in the first place? I don't know.
Well, here's what's interesting to me is it's never been like something I was super deep into, but I did when I read Father Seraphim Rose's book and it had a chapter on UFOs. I thought, well, that's an interesting. Even the Orthodox even have a view on UFOs. How crazy! And then Father Spirit and Bailey, the one I just showed you, that fascinated me. But it is weird how the last 2 years now all of a sudden it seems like the roles have reversed, where like the government, quote unquote, is saying, yes, there's UFOs. And now the conspiracy theorists are like, wait a second, then that's not real then. It's kind of, there's been a bit of a role reversal. But I certainly wouldn't doubt that the CIA or some sort of alphabet agency is, making some kind of psyop at some point for some of this. I will say I'm disappointed. I love Tucker Carlson. A little disappointed when he would obsess a little bit too much over like, whoa, what's really going on with UFOs? It's like, oh.
I don't know. I obsess over that stuff too. I love looking at it, and I'm like, I just want something big to drop.
I don't mind. I should reiterate. It's just when Tucker puts it on TV without really giving us an answer, and he's kind of throwing it out there as like chum in the waters, and it's like, well, let's figure this out before we report on it, because there's too many what ifs or who's done this, or there's not enough concrete evidence of anything other than I suspect that, like I said, I'm sure alphabet agencies are doing some of this.
Yeah, and there's kind of this thought of like, I grew up on crazy UFO stories from like Ancient Aliens to whatever else was on the History Channel, and there was always kind of this looming thought of like, what don't they want us to know? But
Mm-hmm.
now that like they're letting us know everything, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, why are you telling me this?
Uh-huh. That's I start to think psyop. And not to sound like, well, everything's a psyop, one of those people, but it is a little bit convenient. I don't know. I don't know what to think about it right now.
Well, I mean, are you
Same here.
familiar with Project Bluebeam?
I'm vaguely familiar with that, but not enough. I have a girlfriend, not my girlfriend, but a female friend who's obsessed with this stuff, and
Ooh, your girlfriend's gonna get mad.
yeah, she has be about Project Blue Beam is what it's called. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it to formulate a bright, articulate opinion.
Is Project Bluebeam where they're saying there's going to be holograms of a UFO invasion, right? And it's supposed to try and bring the world together as one to try
I
and
don't know if it's
make
going to be holograms, but they do say that they're going to stage an alien invasion to try and bring the world together and discredit all religions.
Mm.
That's
Well,
the idea.
there's a movement within the one world government, new world order, whatever you want to call it, that's trying to do that anyway. That's part of what that Orthodox Church in Ukraine is part of. It's called ecumenism, and it's where, I mean, there's movements pushing it now. That's ultimately, it's a biblical prophecy, of course, as well, that all of the religions will become one. And you see, I mean, this is very, I might see it more because I'm in running these circles that look out for things like that. But there's giant movements now pushing, quote unquote, orthodoxy, but the fake orthodoxy with Islam and Protestantism, and where they go, well, we're all going to the same path. It just takes, we're all headed up the same mountain. We're just taking different routes. It's all the same God. And that's being pushed out there as an extremely common talking point. And you probably find a lot of Americans who call themselves Christians that would also agree with that.
Yeah, that's kind of where you get into a lot of the non-denominational people and
Mm-hmm.
progressive churches and whatnot. Even a lot of those mega churches, like the one by me, they seem to kind of follow that tendency.
Yeah, it's a big trend. The Eastern Orthodox, the real church, is the only ones that are against that.
Yeah, but I will say what you were saying about the UFOs being demons. I find that interesting because, like, in some of the crazier stories I had found, like some of them up in Alaska and stuff, like those alien abductions of the fourth kind, where someone's kidnapped and they're experimented on. There's almost demonic themes in
Mm-hmm.
everything that is described in that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what this book kind of breaks down, stuff like that. Like, you can tell how based, how cool this is just by, I wish I could, oh, this one doesn't have the chapters. Oh yeah, Reliable Witness, Military and Government Responses, Carl Sagan, Life on Earth, Carl Jung, NASA, Close Encounters, The Truth Behind This Deception. All of it that's the chapters in here. It's really good.
Well,
That's changing now. Is there's more credible witnesses too,
Mm-hmm.
witnesses with titles and notoriety, other than some farmer in the woods somewhere.
Yeah, true. Yeah, on Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah. It's like the Bigfoot footage, It's like everyone's talking about the Patterson footage. Like, that's the best evidence we got. That's a guy in a Bigfoot costume. That's
Wearing the
these
watch.
people. Yeah.
Yes.
He's wearing a watch. Are you
God
saying
damn it.
people were wearing a watch in the Patterson footage?
The old famous picture, there's like footage where you guys wearing like a gold watch. It was hilarious.
That's
Oh god. That's funny. And that's their like go-to one. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but now with all this disclosure happening, it's like there's so many people. I mean, it's led by this guy from Blink 182. Like, I don't even know what's going on. Tom DeLonge. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard about that. I don't know much about that either, but someone did just recently tell me the Blink 182 guy is leading this search for aliens or something.
Yeah, it's like the first time I heard him talk, he was like, I don't know a lot of people in the CIA like Blink 182, and I was really interested in this alien stuff. It's like, is that how you
turns
start
out
off,
he
man?
took that Aliens Exist song very literally.
Yeah.
Oh, right, right, right. That's awesome.
So you start a rock band, and then you get security clearance, and then that's how you get to figure out about all these secret government programs where all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
tax.
What's funny about that whole thing too, and I will never not laugh about this, is he was actually in Hillary Clinton's emails because of all of that. Tom DeLonge of Blink 182, and he was asked about it on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, he was talking
He
to
was,
Podesta, right? He was talking to John Podesta.
yeah, and
Uh,
Rogan asked him about it. I was like, yeah, because I'm trying to figure out what the hell these aliens are.
wow. Okay. Did he go to
So,
the place?
They probably
what
should.
place?
The pizza. I'm joking. Those Podesta emails.
Yeah, Podesta. Yeah.
Comet
Yeah.
Ping Pong,
Yeah.
which is
Probably had
totally
to,
a legitimate establishment.
Hmm.
Nothing
probably
bad
had
happens there.
Nothing.
blackmail on him. I mean, yeah, I think that we'll start to see something progress. I think that these little disclosures here and there are kind of leading up to something big. I personally think it might be our technology. If the government has a hold of it, I think they've had a hold of it, and they're trying to reverse engineer whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They've even had a Brett Weinstein went on Joe Rogan's podcast a while ago. He's a physicist, and his complaint was the government didn't have actual physicists looking at the technology. They had just government officials and people who weren't looking at it from the right perspective. So uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how I feel like Brett Weinstein's a very logical guy. I don't think he's crazy. I think
Right.
he's reliable.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's where I'm coming from. But the demons and the alien connection,
Mm-hmm.
that is kind of wild. Something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's freaky. That's freaky because if they're the demons, then who? Where are the angels? Where's
Ah,
God and all this? Are they metaphysical? Are they actually physical?
right.
That's yeah.
These are the questions. Yeah. People listening that find that interesting, just Google Father Seraphim Rose UFOs or Orthodoxy UFOs. You'll find some information.
That could open a whole thread of is David Icke right?
I know. Yeah.
No, oh, dude. If David Icke's right about everything, at least he had a British accent. We should listen to him.
Yeah. It made him sound brilliant. You know.
Really, you can, if you have a British accent, man, you can go far in the podcasting game or
Yeah.
just anything like that.
You can say people are actually lizard people, and everyone goes, maybe he's got a point.
I mean, the
He's
government is pretty fucked.
Hmm. But when Alex Jones yells it very loudly, everyone just thinks it's entertainment, you know. But David Icke, it's like, he must be a professor. I like this guy.
Well, he sits there and does hour-long PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I love conspiracy theories, so I'll sit there and throw on a PowerPoint presentation that he's done in front of an auditorium audience on
Hmm. Hmm.
how demons come from Saturn or Venus, whatever the planet was that he was doing in that thing, and it's entertaining, but at the same time, he's tricking folks. That's what he's doing. He's really getting their money.
Yes, I think so too. There's a bit of a grift to his shtick, it seems like.
Oh yeah,
Got
I'm
to put
typing in
bread
the
on the table.
orthodoxy. Sorry, I'm typing in the orthodoxy UFO.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
maybe I can find something. Mitch, take it on.
No. But God, just so many crazy things with David Icke looking back at that and the reptile. But yeah, there's a lot of very weird things that if you look, there's even theories about Bigfoot being a demon. I don't know if you guys have seen those at all.
I have not seen that one.
Yeah, that's a theory out there that Bigfoot is another demonic entity, and that's why there's no like solid evidence or anything like that.
A demonic entity with a nice gold watch.
Would the devil have anything worse?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
If anything but style. But no, like there's that, skinwalkers, all sorts of talk like that, where I can see how people would try and theorize something like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or anything really involving cryptids in general.
Mm-hmm.
But
So from kind of what I'm saying, it's saying that if you're starting to see UFO phenomenon, it's a sign to Orthodox Christians to walk all the more cautiously and soberly on the path to salvation. So it's saying be closer to your faith because, whenever you're starting to see all of this, there's going to be, people going, well, that means religion's not real, or that means
Yeah.
Christianity's not real. So that's what I'm seeing right here. I'm sure it goes in deeper and more detailed.
Oh yeah. There's a rabbit.
There's a rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, this is I would not have thought that they would have addressed this head on, but it looks like in this article that I
Yeah.
found here.
And Father Seraphim Rose, who's gone now, he addressed it head on, and I want to say that was about 81 or something. So even back then.
That's an interesting thing too, because um, I don't know how familiar you are with the Catholic Church, but I was raised Catholic, so that's kind of what I know.
Oh, okay.
And there's a lot of people within the Catholic Church who have very similar, like they also want to analyze and understand things.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me wonder if those sorts of people within the Catholic Church have had conversations with someone like him.
Yeah, I don't know Catholics as well because I grew up in the South where it was mainly Protestant down here. My girlfriend is up in Pennsylvania, and she grew up. It's like a culturally Catholic area, and so to her, when I'm telling her about Protestantism, she's like, "Wow, I've never seen anything like that." And she's explaining how the Catholic Church services were, and I think, "Oh, I've never seen anything like that." So it's funny that it's such a foreign world to me.
Yeah, it's funny how the different forms bring all those different things to the table. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, I grew up in a kind of a different area where I don't know if you know anything about Michigan, but aside from a bunch of Polish people, there's a huge Muslim population up there too.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then down here in Florida, there's a big Jewish population.
Yeah,
So I
that I
try,
knew.
try to learn about all the Abrahamic places, I
Yes.
guess.
Yeah.
Mitch, isn't that town in Michigan the one that is banning like the pride flag, the rainbow flag from rainbow flag from the schools, and they're kind of teaming up with Christians there in that one city where they took over. They is in.
Yeah, from what I understand, I can't remember what city it was, but basically in 2015 or 2016, they're bragging about electing an all Muslim city council.
Wow.
And all these years later, they basically removed all the pride stuff from all city property.
Based.
Mhm.
So
It is, and they're teaming up with Christians to do it. I mean, it has no place in public school.
No.
You know, that's my thought. It's like, do you want? How about we just teach kids how to load and shoot guns?
Yeah.
That's just as politically charging, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't want that. School is supposed to be school. You got to read, but not that. But my dog's going crazy down there. Did you hear that? Sorry.
nah, not hearing
Yeah.
the pooch there.
Okay, good.
No, we're good with that. But even with guns, though, you could argue with that there's at least a practical, knowledge-based thing to be learned there.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with like the pride flag is that's an ideological flag.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're kind of crossing into that category of everything that is left is morally right.
Correct. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
they're into, yeah, for sure.
And let me look it up because I think they passed it to where they said only the American flag can fly, which is like I don't know. I feel like if a state wanted to fly like the
Yeah.
Gadsden flag or something, they should be able to fly that.
Well, that's at least historical.
Yeah.
Like if you were saying like let's hoist the ANCAP flag, that would be
Yeah.
kind of questionable because that's ideological.
Yeah. Or a elephant or a donkey. If you're doing like political flags in schools, I think that's a little odd. But I do know that a friend of mine over when his kid's school shut down and they were doing the remote learning, he walked by one day and his kids ate. And the very first day of school, they were teaching him about the trans flag and the rainbow flag. And he was like, wait, what on earth is this? And he couldn't believe it. Yeah, an 8-year-old. Day one of school.
8-year-old.
Yeah.
That is wild. Did it have something to do with the teacher or the actual curriculum?
I never asked. That's a good question, but I do know through his actions it stopped.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really what parents have to do, and not just parents, just like anyone who's not politically involved. Like I hate that, people just turn a blind eye to this kind of stuff because it is important because it trickles down so easy from the top down because the federal government subsidizes all your states, and then the state funds the education system, but
Yeah.
the state wants that Fed money, and then your county and your city wants that state money, and neither of them are going to get any money if they
Right.
don't conform to certain policies. And
Yep.
so that's my question: is if it's the curriculum, then there's a lot you can do about that. If it's the teacher, that's even easier, I think. But I think a lot of schools it does come down to the teacher wanting to teach these things, and I
Yeah.
think they see it as a civil rights issue, which
They
you
do.
know they do, and that's fair. But it's also one of those things where it's like the goalpost has been shifted, it's been moved so
Yeah.
many times down the road.
Down the slippery slope.
Yeah, it has, and it just doesn't belong in school, in my opinion. Um, there's so many other things. There's just so many other things we could teach kids. But
Yeah.
here's the article here. Looks like they voted unanimously to ban the pride flag from city properties.
Good.
So, this adds 2 dozen municipalities and school districts across the country. So it looks like this kind of legislation might be, or resolution might be spreading to different city councils, and I think that's a good thing. I don't have anything against you wanting to fly any kind of flag, like college football team, whatever, anywhere, but you don't have to make it a part of your school curriculum.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
I gotta say, this reminds me of something in a hilarious way, and it's just funny all these years later to see the shoe on the other foot. This kind of reminds me, and this is just my former atheist talking here, of when they would have something of like, I don't know, like the manger around Christmas on city property, and then atheist people complain, so they got that removed.
Yep.
And now it's like
Oh yeah.
Christians and like the Muslims, they basically realize they can play that same card in this instance.
Yeah. Yeah. They basically said, get the 10 Commandments and the manger scene off our city property, and we'll replace it with our religion. And they've done the pride thing.
I am pretty sure that happened to one city in Oklahoma,
The Church
where
of
the
Satan.
Church of Satan got
Yep.
Baphomet put in
That's,
there.
yep.
So this is a good reason to not intermix religion with your government, at
Mm-hmm.
least with your public school, I guess. Just because it's written, that's what our Constitution says, and well, it's in the penumbras, I guess, and in the case law, and lemon test, and all that after the Constitution to not intertwine religion and government. So I think the same goes for political views. I think I think any kind of public education or something like that has to be politically neutral. And you're seeing now even like the legal system is being used as a arm of some sort of political movement.
Yes.
You're seeing that with the Trump indictment, and even with Biden now, they're trying to get Biden too. So that's one of those things. Like, do we become a banana republic because we're trying to enforce this political ideology on a huge country?
Yeah. I mean, well, it seems like that's what we are at this point. He's
Yeah.
sitting president's basically having his department arrest and indict his only formidable opponent.
Mhm. And right now the clear favorite to
Yeah.
be his opponent too.
The clear
Yeah.
favorite beat him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's not going to run a campaign. I mean, I don't, RFK is coming out strong.
I
We'll
know.
see.
I'm fascinated by him.
Me too. Me
I
too.
don't think they're going to allow a debate between RFK and Biden, would be my guess. But I sure would love it. And I heard Daniel McAdams say that he's never seen Ron Paul more excited about a presidential candidate than he is for RFK.
Yeah, it's in his blood.
Yeah.
That's why I like him. It's in his blood. Now, whether you agree with him on his stances on vaccines or whether you agree with him on his Second Amendment rights,
That I
uh,
don't know about, but he's been very good on the COVID stuff, Fauci, vax, all of that, which needs.
foreign intervention, he's very
Yeah,
good on foreign
correct.
intervention. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
I agree with you there. I'll take, it's like we're at this point where we're like, I'll take it.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I agree with. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's somewhat of a win.
yeah.
I think it would be a huge win. If RFK got in there, it'd be a huge win for the country. From what we've been at, I
I just
don't.
him on the debate stage. If
Yeah.
people, could you imagine the audience? I mean, it would kind of be with the Ron Paul being on in 8 and 12, what that did for a lot of people. It changed people's minds. It woke people up in a sense. And on the right, and I think an RFK run, if they allow it, would wake a lot of people up too. In the center, maybe on the right, but certainly on the left, I would hope. I don't know if they're too far gone now.
I think he would have to do the debates like because of his voice. He'd have to come out fiery like Trump in the debates. He'd have to be like, Biden has slept for 12 hours today. Just get him.
Yeah, it also, imagine just hearing the audio of a debate between RFK and Biden. That might be a bit of a challenge.
Oh God. Yeah, no, it would be amazing. And then if he got to Trump, obviously Trump's going to make fun of his voice.
Yeah.
I don't know what Trump would call him. He'd call him like voice in a box, or voice in a box RFK. I don't know. But it's fascinating to think about that this institution of presidential debates has been suspended since COVID.
Yeah.
Under the auspices of a pretty much hyper cold, hyper flu.
Yeah.
And we can't even have a presidential debate. He didn't campaign.
No.
It's just one of those things where it's like, it's just crazy to me. Our forefathers are turning in their graves right now.
Yeah, and he more votes than any other presidential candidate in history. Not right. Pretty impressive.
Yeah. I still am amazed that our legal system didn't want to take a harder look at each of those cases that Trump and his team brought there. Some of it they didn't want to look at it because of political question, but in other cases it's like they just kind of said, "Hey, we're shutting it down."
Yeah, I mean, I think somewhere in there, and this is just my own thought, there's almost where someone kind of thought, I could see this being an actual quote unquote stolen election, but if this comes out, we are done as a country. That kind of thing, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense.
They'd rather roll with and go, you know what? Let's push this, sweep this under the rug. If this gets out, we're done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I like Dinesh D'Souza's 2000 Mules.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if you've seen that.
I actually thought that was fascinating. I like the camera. I mean, they had the camera footage of these guys doing this,
right? And it's a very, I don't know. They just came from a home team perspective. Like they had Charlie Kirk and all them sitting in a circle. Like I wish they would have had some voices on each side doing that. It might have been more palatable to everybody.
I agree. Yep.
But it's a very convincing documentary.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if they had gotten someone from the Jorgensen campaign who was smart enough to realize that in the audits they found out that votes from her were given to Joe Biden in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
That would have been great. But anyway, we're starting to come up on the top of the hour here. So before we go into plugs, I just have one final question. It's a quick one. I know you're a drummer and I'm a guitarist, so I got to ask, who is your favorite drummer?
I have a few depending on what kind of music. I would say rock and roll overall. I love Keith Moon from The Who, Earl Palmer, who invented rock and roll drumming in New Orleans, played with Little Richard and all of the black 50s R&B and rock and roll artists. Buddy Harmon is a country from the 50s and 60s that did rockabilly and stuff. Modern day, I don't always love Green Day's music. I love their old stuff, but I do think their drummer is one of my favorite punk drummers. He's superb. He's a bit of a tool and kind of a jerk, but his drumming's really fabulous. And then Gene Krupa, jazz, of course. There's a few.
Hell yeah, rock on. So Well, then we'll jump right in. You got anything you want to plug before we wrap up here?
I will plug my show Counterflow, which is the new episode drops on live on YouTube in about 3 minutes. So you can go to the Counterflow podcast page on YouTube and find it. You can follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel, and counterflowpodcast.com.
Hell yeah. Rob?
Yeah, go follow my new Instagram and YouTube, R Vincent Comedy. I always performing here in Pensacola, Florida. I just did a guest spot in Panama City, and maybe Sunday I'll hit Mobile at their mic coming back. I'm here in Florida. If you want to book me out in your state, I will come do some comedy for you. Also follow Decrim Nature Florida, Decrim Nature FL. We're trying to pass decriminalization for plant medicines and entheogens at your city here in Florida.
Good.
Hell yeah. And go check out at Mitch Connor. Go check out Mitch Connor JLo on Twitter to see what my shit posting is like, and go check out 1776swag.com. Despite everything we've said about Kennedy here tonight, aside from being a fascinating candidate, he's also taught me there's still money in the Kennedy name.
Yes, there is.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Buck, for coming out again. We will see you next week.